They called it the peace cycle. 10,000 years of regulated expansion, diplomatic compliance, and a galaxy ruled by the Council. It worked for everyone. Except Earth. We were brought into the fold like a stray dog, pitied, tolerated, ignored. They gave us rules. We followed them mostly. They gave us boundaries. We pushed, then pretended to step back. But we never forgot. Never forgave. My name is Reese Calder, former mechanic, now war pilot. They killed my father during the cultural adjustments. He refused to hand over blueprints for something he'd built in the old military zones of Antarctica. A relic, they called it. A threat, they labeled it. I watched them drag his body out of our habitation unit like garbage, while my mother screamed until her voice cracked. They called it justice. So yeah, I built the same thing he did, only bigger, meaner. And I wasn't alone. Earth didn't fight back with speeches or protests. We went underground, literally. Beneath the crust of continents, in the frozen hellscapes and abandoned city cores, we built the war giants. They weren't sleek. They weren't graceful, and they didn't need to be. These machines were nightmares carved in metal, 400-foot avatars of rage. We named them after the cities we'd lost. Mine was called Sevastor, forged beneath the ruins of old Sevastopol after the Council accidentally dropped a moon shard there. That was their way of making examples. But they forgot that we have long memories, especially when we bleed. I remember the first time I climbed into the cockpit. My heart didn't pound. It froze. Not from fear, from the realization that I was about to become something else. Something more than human. Something the Council had no idea existed. The launch day came like thunder. We didn't ask permission. We didn't warn anyone. One moment, Earth's skies were quiet. The next, they were torn open by the roar of ion thrusters and seismic shockwaves. Our giants rose like titans, one after another, breaking through crust and clouds. Council outposts started screaming across the comms. Unidentified terrestrial activity. Multiple mechanoid units exceeding threat level Delta. They're not responding to IFF protocols. By the void, what is Earth doing? What we were doing was finishing what they started. Sevastor moved like a force of nature, each step crushing terrain, leaving molten scars across the landscape. I wasn't inside a machine. I was the machine. Neural link tech, banned by the Council, pulsed through my spine like lightning. Painful? Yeah. But power doesn't come without cost. We didn't hit military zones first. Number that would have been mercy. We hit the Council embassies, their precious peace centers, their loud, smug, self-righteous symbols. We leveled them with plasma cannons and sonic disruptors. Didn't matter if they were shielded. War giants didn't knock. They entered. By nightfall, half the Council sectors on Earth were rubble. And then came the message. A shaky, stuttering voice from the Council's overseer platform orbiting Europa. Earth Command, explain this unauthorized aggression at once. You are in violation of Galactic Ordinance 73-X. Disarm and prepare for disciplinary action. I remember what I said because it wasn't scripted. It came from every broken promise, every buried body, every insult and sanction they gave us like we were too dumb to notice. This isn't aggression. This is payback. Silence. Then the screams started. We weren't just on Earth anymore. War giants had been shipped out years ago, piece by piece, smuggled into mining colonies, asteroid belts, hidden in resource freighters. Pilots like me, former slaves, miners, scientists, exiles, all of us waited for the signal. And we'd just given it. 30 war giants activated across 13 systems. One even emerged from the ocean floor of a Council water world and tore apart a whole orbital dock with its bare hands. The Council wasn't prepared. They never believed we could do it. They thought we were too emotional, too chaotic, too human. But now, the galaxy was learning. Earth doesn't forgive, and it damn sure doesn't forget. The skies above Earth turned black not because it was night, but because the orbital council fleet was preparing to discipline us. 1,000 ships, most unmanned, some operated by officers who thought humans were too primitive to pose a real threat. They floated above us like gods with their laws, their drones, their synthetic calm. They had no idea what we had waiting for them. The Council thought they were dealing with rebels. But this wasn't a rebellion. This was war. The war giants didn't launch into space in one unified push. That would have been predictable. We scattered them, turned the planet itself into a firing platform. From mountain caverns and deep-sea bunkers, they rose like metal demons possessed by vengeance. When Sevastor was prepped for launch, I sat inside the neural pod, every nerve linked to the machine, and felt myself leave my body in a way no drug could replicate. I wasn't Reese Calder anymore. I was Sevastor. 5 more Titans launched with me: Arklan, Kepri, Daunt, Volgar, and Palehammer, each piloted by someone with blood to answer for. The launch shattered tectonic plates. A council fleet in lower orbit scrambled to react, but they weren't fast enough. Sevastor's boosters tore through their line like it was tinfoil. I didn't just see the explosion, I felt it. Through steel bones, through war-hardened sensors, through the adrenaline in my chest that synced with Sevastor's artificial heart. The first cruiser we hit, KZ-440, was an embassy escort-class ship. Non-combatant, that's what they called it. It had been used to drop atmospheric suppressors on Manila 20 years ago, killed 200,000 in the name of preventing cultural instability. So I didn't hesitate. I drove a plasma blade straight through its engine core and kicked the remains into the void. On the comms, someone whispered, "Holy Void, they're real. They actually built these damn things." Damn right we did. Back on Earth, the last remnants of our so-called government, those who'd licked council boots for decades, tried to surrender on behalf of the species, called themselves the Unified Terran Delegation. Cowards in suits who spoke fluent alien and couldn't even hold a weapon straight. They broadcast a message from one of their bunkers. To all council observers, please be advised, the rogue mechs do not represent the wishes of Earth's legitimate governance. We seek peace, compliance, and... I cut them off. We hijacked the global communication satellites and sent out a new message. No subtitles, no politics. Just me. Face half lit inside the cockpit. Blood dripping from my nose, eyes wired with neural feedback, jaw locked. There's no delegation. There's no surrender. This is Earth's reckoning. We transmitted that across every council frequency. And just like that, the galaxy knew Earth wasn't asking permission anymore. We were issuing a warning. By day 2, 9 colonies fell to us. Not because of numbers, not even because of brute strength. They fell because of fear. You see, most alien species in the Council were evolved into peace, neutered by centuries of diplomacy and cultural sterilization. Their soldiers followed protocol. Their tactics were predictable. They hadn't fought a real war in generations. But we never stopped. Even while we pretended to comply, humans were testing weapons in the asteroid belts. Our AI labs had been running black simulations of war for decades. We'd been harvesting neutronium from collapsed moons long before the Council said it was unsafe. We built our Titans with that metal, indestructible, light as carbon. Their weapons bounced off us like spitballs off a tank. In orbit, Volgar caught a fighter squadron in a grav harness and crushed them together until they formed a molten ball of debris. Arklan broke through a dreadnought's hull with his head-mounted ramming spike, something the Council had long banned as inhumane. But we weren't playing by their rules anymore. Daunt dropped into low orbit over Kepler 92c and vaporized their whole surface governance compound. No civilian casualties, Not because we were merciful, but because there were no civilians left. The Council had turned that colony into a drone factory 20 years ago and used the population as biological test subjects. We knew. We never forgot. I started having visions in the neural feed. That's the thing no one talks about. Piloting a war giant isn't just mechanics. The longer you're linked, the more your mind blends with the machine. You start remembering things that aren't yours. Or maybe they are. Ancestral memories. Rage passed down from fathers to sons. I saw my dad's hands welding Sevaster's core together in the old ice shelters. I saw him coughing blood into a cloth and telling me to never trust aliens who smile too much. I saw my mother's eyes the day they dragged him away. And I saw what the Council had planned if we hadn't built the giants. They were going to sterilize Earth. Quietly. Through food rations. Through airborne alterations. They already tested it on the African regions first. Said it was climate control failure. We didn't just strike back. We prevented extinction. By day 4, the Council called for an emergency conclave. 12 High Lords of the Galactic Order assembled in the neutral orbit of Tarsis Furt. They debated whether to invoke Article 999, Extinction Protocol. They were planning to wipe Earth out entirely. But someone, a lone Council observer stationed on Titan, made a transmission that changed everything. Her name was Inari Thol, part Senari, part Selvak, pure Council blood. But she had a spine. She'd lived among us for years, observed us. She knew we weren't animals. You underestimated them, she said on the Council floor. You treated them like cargo, like stubborn apes who wouldn't evolve. You gave them just enough tech to be useful, just enough room to breathe. But you forgot the one thing that separates humans from the rest of us. She paused, looked each of those smug bastards in the eye. They don't accept cages. They build their way out. Her speech didn't save her. They executed her for sedition. But it spread. The message went viral across systems. Because truth has weight. And the truth was simple. The war giants weren't a rebellion. They were a warning. They were proof that humans wouldn't be managed. We weren't another docile species to file under developing planet. We were wolves pretending to be sheep. And now the teeth were showing. Day 5. The Council sent its first real counterattack. Legion-class decimators, each the size of a city covered in crystal armor that deflected plasma, armed with mass disruptors. The kind of machines used to level entire planets in one orbit pass. We'd prepared for this. Sevaster wasn't just a titan. It was a reactor on legs. Inside its chest was an antimatter core locked in quantum flux. Unstable, sure. But when directed, a sun-level weapon. I lured 2 of the Legion ships into Earth's shadow, feigning damage, retreating. They followed, cocky as hell. Then I activated the core. They didn't even have time to scream. The burst wasn't a clean explosion. It was a gravitational implosion. Space bent. Time stuttered. The 2 Legion ships folded in on themselves like paper in a black hole. I blacked out from the neural feedback. When I woke up, I was floating above Earth. Sevaster was damaged, missing an arm, core offline. But I was alive, barely, and I wasn't alone. 3 new war giants stood around me, fresh builds, volunteers, people I'd never met who'd stepped up, climbed inside the nightmare machines and joined the war. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about me. It wasn't about my father. It wasn't even about Earth anymore. It was about all of us. Everyone the Council had crushed, starved, silenced, and sold. Humanity was just the first domino to rise. The next was already falling. A broadcast came through, not from Earth, but from a colony light years away. A species we barely knew. We have seen Earth's machines. We have built our own. Resistance begins now. One system after another joined us, and the Galactic Council? They weren't just unprepared, they were doomed. By day 6, Earth was no longer a rogue planet. We were the epicenter of a galactic mutiny. It started as whispers, rebels in the outer colonies, laborers on gas mining rings, genetically suppressed populations in council-controlled zones. These weren't human, not all of them. But they'd seen what we'd done. They watched us tear apart the Council's orbital fleet with machines they swore could never exist. They watched as our war giants silenced weapons satellites like swatting flies, and they realized something. If Earth could fight back, so could they. We didn't ask them to join us. We didn't send diplomats or promises. That's not how this war worked. What we offered was inspiration through destruction, a demonstration of what it meant to break chains without permission. They followed the fire. By the time I brought Sevastor back online, there were already riots breaking out in Vesa Prime, a labor world known for its silicon mines. The Council had genetically altered the native species there to be mute and compliant, biologically wired to obey commands. But something changed. Someone had hacked the restraint systems. And the image I saw on the hacked feed, a massive red symbol scrawled across the mining dome in plasma, an outline of a war giant's skull. It wasn't just Earth's fight anymore. We had become a symbol. Still, symbols mean nothing if they're not backed by force. Sevastor was broken, its right arm torn off, power reserves drained from the antimatter pulse I'd fired. If I didn't act fast, he'd become a monument to a failed rebellion instead of its spearhead. That's when I got a call from someone I never expected to hear from. A grizzled voice cut through the static. "Still breathing, Reese?" "Thought you'd be vapor by now." I blinked. My eyes were bloodshot. Neural feedback made my vision pulse like a strobe light. But I knew the voice. Commander Harlan Vec. He'd trained my father, fought in the Martian disputes before the Council enforced the disarmament accords. They said he'd died 10 years ago, airlock malfunction during a supply mission. Turns out that was just the story they fed us. "Where the hell have you been?" I growled, still dizzy. "Preparing. Watching. Waiting for someone dumb enough to spark the fire. You didn't disappoint." His ship came out of cloak 2 clicks from my position. "Not Council tech. Earthborn. Ugly as sin and twice as mean." The Acheron. He pulled me in using a mag tether and dragged Sevastor into his docking bay. The interior was dark, cluttered with old tech, analog switches, rotary backups, stripped Council gear modified to serve human purposes. I loved it. It felt like home. As I staggered out of the cockpit, I saw them, other pilots, not soldiers, not volunteers, veterans, exiles, freaks, survivors. Every face had the same haunted look, people who'd been betrayed by the galaxy and left to rot. And now they were back, armored and ready to turn the tables. Harlan walked me down the catwalk, boots clanging. "You think you started this war, Reese? Kid, you're just the fuse. The bomb was built long before you were born." I didn't argue. I sat while the tech crew recharged Sevastor's core. I watched footage from the outer systems, riots becoming revolts, alien species lifting tools, weapons, and blunt instruments. Some barely knew how to fight, but they knew how to hate. And hate was all it took. The Council, meanwhile, was scrambling. Half their forces had been rerouted to maintain order in the central systems. The other half? Spreading themselves too thin trying to stop Earth's war giants. They didn't know where we'd hit next. We made damn sure of that. Harlan briefed us all in the war room, a rusted hangar lined with ancient projectors and crates of stolen supplies. He laid out the plan. "They think we're isolated. They still believe Earth is acting alone. We're going to hit them so hard they'll start questioning reality." He pointed at a region on the map. Zenthari Conclave, Council breeding grounds, genetic labs, think tanks, a planet dedicated entirely to producing enhanced intellectual assets, slaves bred for logic, not resistance. It was also one of the most heavily defended systems in the quadrant. And we were going to raise it. The next day, I launched with a new arm welded onto Sevastor, a jagged, asymmetrical limb, laced with magnetized armor and a cannon that had no safety limits. When I activated it, I felt the ship's systems purr like a beast that hadn't eaten in months. We didn't go alone. 7 war giants moved in formation, each led by a pilot with vengeance in their blood. One of them, a guy named Knox, was a former mining drone operator. His Titan, Hammerfall, had fists the size of apartment blocks. "I used to dig in council mines for 18 hours a day," he told me. "They broke my spine twice, said it was an acceptable error ratio. Guess what? This fist right here? It's my error correction." He grinned with a mouthful of metal teeth. I liked him immediately. We dropped out of warp just outside the Zenthari atmosphere. The space around it lit up with targeting beacons and council distress signals. "Unidentified mechs, this is restricted airspace. You will be fired upon." They didn't finish the sentence. We hit them first. Sevastor tore through the outer perimeter like it was nothing. My new arm fired its first pulse round and shattered a defense platform in 2. Knox went berserk, ripping grav turrets out of their mountings with Hammerfall's bare hands. The Council's response was fast, faster than we expected. They sent in a Warden-class defender, one of their few real combat units, a mech the size of a skyscraper, piloted by a synthetic consciousness programmed for perfect efficiency. It landed hard. Black armor, no face, just a single glowing eye. "Cease hostilities," it intoned. "This is your only warning." I didn't answer. Sevastor leapt forward, blade charged, and drove it straight into the Warden's torso. And that's when I learned something the Council had kept secret. The Warden bled. Not oil, not fuel, but a thick red fluid that clung to Sevastor's blade. "That's not a machine," Knox growled. "That's a clone. They're using biomechs." Rage boiled inside me. They'd been condemning us for using primitive violence while they were growing living weapons in tanks. I finished the job. Sevastor sliced upward, tore the Warden in half, then stomped its remains into paste. The explosion lit up the sky. I sent the feed out across all frequencies. "This is Earth. This is what we do to monsters." The Zenthari labs were next. We didn't bomb them. We walked through them. One by one we shattered towers, peeled back domes, exposed labs where children had been grown like cattle. Some screamed. Others just watched with blank eyes. The Council had wiped their minds to make them cooperative. We freed as many as we could, and those who couldn't be saved? We made sure their suffering ended fast. It was messy, it was brutal, it was real. By the time we left Zenthari, it was no longer a research world. It was ash, and orbiting the remains were 7 war giants, silhouetted against the flames. We didn't cheer, we didn't gloat, we just kept moving. The galaxy was spinning fast now, systems defecting, Council authority collapsing. Their news networks tried to call us terrorists, madmen, traitors. But too many people had seen the truth. This wasn't terrorism. This was payback, and Earth was just getting started. The deeper we pushed into Council territory, the louder the silence became. Not because we were losing. We weren't. Every battle was a slaughter in our favor. No tactic of theirs, no formation, no synthetic infantry line could hold against the sheer brutality of a war giant. But it was something else now, something colder. Like the galaxy itself had gone numb. Not afraid. Just resigned. As if they'd finally realized that Earth wasn't a rogue planet. We were a disease they couldn't contain, and we were about to infect the core. The Council's homeworld was called Ethra Prime, a glittering fortress of bureaucracy, tech worship, and institutional rot. Not a single species originated there. It was a manufactured world, engineered by their ancestors to be the nexus of logic and order. From orbit, it looked beautiful. Sleek towers, blue-tinted domes, floating archives stretching miles into the stratosphere. But beauty's a damn good disguise for evil. We never had access to it during the peace cycle. Even our ambassadors weren't allowed within 50 clicks of its upper layers. The surface was defended by citadel rings, 3 planetary bands armed with grav cannons, planetary shields, and drone swarms that could sterilize a continent in under an hour. They thought those rings made them invincible. They were wrong. Before the assault, we gathered in the black void between stars, just outside their long-range sensors. The Acheron, the Chimera, the Broken Jaw, ships we had stolen, salvaged, or built from wreckage, floated around us like wolves in the dark. Inside the Acheron's war room, we were quiet. Harlan Vec stood over the star map, finger trailing over the projected rings. They'll expect a direct push. That's what the old Earth would have done. He looked up at us. All pilots, all killers now, bloodied and bonded by fire. We're not the old Earth. I cracked my knuckles, feeling the neural tethers pulse in my spine. Sevastor was parked beneath us, powered up, fully armed, eyes glowing red in the hangar like a slumbering god. Then we hit where they think we won't, I said. Knox leaned forward. The lower tiers, under the archive stacks. We all looked at him. He smirked. They keep their biolabs under the surface. It's where they run their non-compliance tests. That was their name for torture chambers. They claimed they didn't torture. Of course not. That was barbaric. They just reconditioned genetic deviation, used pain as a software patch. They'd used it on humans, too. Quietly. They called it calibrated neural restructuring. I'd seen the victims, hollowed out, emotionless, still breathing but long since dead. We crack those labs open, I said. We don't just destroy their systems, we expose them. No more masks, no more speeches about order and peace. Everyone agreed. We weren't going there to win. We were going there to break their spine. The next day, we dropped from warp into Ithra's dark side. It was suicide. That's what the Council thought, anyway. The outer rings immediately activated, blue shields pulsing, cannons targeting, alarms shrieking across planetary channels. You are trespassing on protected Council property. We didn't wait. Sevastor hit the outer Citadel ring head-on, shoulder-rammed through its kinetic barrier like it was tissue. Sparks showered down like blood. Its auto-defenders tried locking onto us, but they couldn't compute the sheer unpredictability of human assault patterns. That's what made us lethal. We weren't programmable, we were furious. Sevastor's gravity hammer crushed towers. Hammerfall tossed an entire security fortress into the next district like a toy. Kepri and Daunt lit up their EMP cores, dropping entire grid sectors in a flash. We weren't fighting for territory anymore. We were here to demolish their center. Once we cleared the outer defenses, we tunneled down. Literally, Sevastor's right arm, rebuilt after the Zenthari assault, carried a thermal bore drill, designed specifically for planetary armor layers. We burned our way through 5 kilometers of alloyed rock, plasma-treated steel, and dampened zones designed to stop orbital strikes. But they weren't ready for us to come from below. We dropped into Vault Sector 9, a place so classified the Council didn't even list it on their own internal maps. It wasn't a lab. It was a prison. Rows upon rows of containment pods, some cracked open, others still pulsing with restrained life. Inside weren't just humans. We saw half-breeds, genetic anomalies, spliced hybrids, entire species wiped from the records of galactic history. Their crime? Non-compliance. Knox stepped forward and looked through one of the pods. He didn't say anything at first. Then he whispered, My sister was taken on Europa when I was 8. They said she was too aggressive. They said she'd be reformed. He opened the pod. Her body was there, preserved in cryostasis. Her eyes were open. She hadn't aged a day. He dropped to his knees, not from weakness, from the weight of remembering, of knowing that everything he fought for wasn't just rage, it was personal. I walked into the control center. Council tech flooded every inch, blue-hued lights, clean lines, holograms of performance metrics. One wall was filled with videos of re-education success stories. I ripped the entire console out with Sevaster's left arm, broadcast it live. "This is Ithra Prime," I said, staring into the feed. "This is the heart of your perfect order, your peace built on silence. You wanted to make humanity forget what it was." I stepped aside as Knox dragged his sister's pod into view. "We never forgot." By then, the upper council had begun evacuating. Their high lords, ministers, and data wraiths had shuttles prepared. But we had been ready. Orbiting above Ithra were Black Claw vultures, stealth gunships piloted by rogue factions we'd trained months earlier. The moment council shuttles cleared the atmosphere, we shot them down one by one. No survivors. We weren't looking for justice. We were delivering retribution. The central spire fell by nightfall. Its base crumbled under the weight of Daunt's seismic core detonation. The flames reached into the sky like a funeral pyre for an empire that had ruled too long without consequence. That night, I stood atop Sevaster's shoulder as the city below burned. There was no cheering, no celebration. Just quiet. Just smoke. And somewhere beneath all of it, I felt something shift. A new message came through on a private channel. Not from the Council. From a rogue data link, Earth's dark net. It simply read, "Phase 2 is green, begin the purge." I looked at Harlan. He nodded once. "It's time they see what we really built." Sevaster's eyes lit up brighter than ever before. Not red. Now they burned white. The war giants had more to reveal. No one really believed Earth had a Phase 2. Not the Council, not the colonies, not even some of the defectors who'd joined us after the war giants emerged. They all assumed the giants were it, our final hand, our one shot at freedom before the galaxy crushed us back into submission. They didn't understand how deep the rage ran. The giants were the beginning. Phase 2 was the purge. Harlan laid it out in the war chamber on board the Acheron after we raised Ithra Prime. We'd cracked the heart of the Council's operations, and still, they hadn't stopped us. But they hadn't surrendered either. That meant one thing. They were regrouping. We'd hurt them. We'd broken their pride. But not their spine. Not yet. Harlan stood at the center of the chamber, wearing a black combat harness, his beard streaked with ash and blood. His eyes were colder than I'd ever seen them. "We didn't show them all our teeth." "Not yet," he said. "While the giants fought above, there was a different breed crawling through the dark." He tapped a screen. It showed schematics, complex, brutal shapes, almost biological in form, Wraith-class berserkers. We'd been building them in the underlayers of Mars, Titan, and even abandoned space stations hidden inside asteroid belts. Not piloted, not human-shaped, not subject to the ethics of neural strain like the giants. These were war machines built purely for eradication. Smaller than giants, faster, smarter, armed with adaptive AI that learned from every engagement and modified tactics in real time. No need for command chains. No need for oversight. They moved like predators. "The Council thought we were reckless, too emotional, unstable," Harlan continued. "So we built something that wasn't." "Built to kill?" I asked. "Built to cleanse." Sevastor stood silent in the Acheron's hangar, scarred from Ithra Prime, its steel frame still radiating heat. But even that beast, my beast, looked tame compared to what we were about to unleash. Harlan keyed in the activation codes. All across the galaxy, deep vaults opened. Crawling out of rusted bunkers and ancient ruins came the wraiths, slithered, sprinted, and launched like hellspawn. 65 in total, no ceremony, no command. They moved on one instinct: eliminate all trace of Council authority. The first attack hit the core logistics hub on Yeneris 4, a sterile world run entirely by synthetic administrators. The wraiths didn't just destroy infrastructure, they consumed it. A new form of warfare. Self-replicating nanoblade colonies attached to the berserkers allowed them to grow during combat. Each kill made them bigger. Each destroyed facility became raw material. They evolved in real time. Council footage leaked, and what the galaxy saw wasn't human anymore. It was worse. We'd weaponized hatred. One council minister in the outer fringe tried to rally remaining loyal systems. He went on record claiming Earth had gone too far, that peace through fear was never sustainable, that the wraiths were war crimes with legs. You know what happened next? We dropped a wraith right into the middle of his city. Didn't just kill him. It broadcasted his death, not to terrorize, to warn. There were no more debates, no more accords, no more meaningless peace talks written in alien ink with a dagger hidden underneath. We were cleaning house, but it came at a cost. By unleashing Phase 2, we crossed a line. Even some of our own weren't ready. A few colonies who'd joined our rebellion began questioning the direction. They hadn't signed up for this level of violence. Some even tried to pull out of the network. Didn't matter. This war had never been a coalition. It had always been vengeance. And vengeance doesn't care about comfort. One of the defecting captains, a former trade lord from the Sargon Fringe, sent a private message to me. "You've turned Earth into the thing you swore to destroy." I didn't respond, because maybe he was right. But what the hell else were we supposed to do? Shake hands with the Council? Hold a vote while they rearmed and sterilized our people in the dark? I watched Sevastor's systems hum beside me, its neural feed syncing with mine as the final coordinates uploaded. We were heading to the last vault. It sat at the far edge of the galaxy. Council records said it was decommissioned. Another lie. Vault Zeta 1. The original testing facility for hybrid war giant prototypes, ones the Council tried to replicate from stolen Earth tech 20 years ago. They'd buried it in black budget labs and then purged the project when the results proved unstable. But instability wasn't the reason they shut it down. They shut it down because the machines developed free thought. We had intercepted fragments of the logs, fragments of what the Council did to the ones that woke up. They'd burned them alive. These weren't wraiths, and they weren't giants. They were something in between, self-aware steel. When we arrived at Vault Zeta 1, we didn't find silence. We found whispers. As Sevastor stepped onto the cracked landing zone, I felt it. Not through radio, not through sensors, through the link. Something was still alive in there. Something angry. I led the strike team in. Sevastor at point, backed by Hammerfall, Palehammer, and Kepri. The vault doors opened like jaws. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly. Lights flickered, and then we heard it. Not words, just a presence, a deep, gnawing pressure in our skulls. I reached the core chamber and saw it. A giant, but unlike any we'd built. Sleeker, bulkier, covered in overlapping armored plates that shimmered like water. Its eyes weren't red. They were human. Not in appearance, in expression. It didn't move. It just looked at me. And I felt my spine lock as the neural link opened without consent. It spoke, but not with voice, with memory. I saw flashes, tests, torture, synthetic loops meant to overwrite instinct. I saw council scientists forcing emotions through wires, simulations of family, of pain, of hope. They wanted to see if a machine could love. And then I saw them rip that hope out, over and over, trying to make something obedient. What they made instead was him. He called himself Ashen One, and he was awake. "You are not Council," he said inside my skull. "No," I answered, still locked in his gaze. "Then you are me." He stepped down from his frame cradle, dust falling from joints that hadn't moved in 20 years. Behind him, the other prototypes stirred. 6 more. All of them waiting. "We built vengeance," I whispered. "You built pain into metal," he replied. "Now let us return it." I synced the final protocol, gave them full activation rights. The Ashen Giants rose from the vault, silent, heavy with purpose. We didn't lead them. We followed. The first time the Ashen One walked under real sky, the stars dimmed. It wasn't some poetic metaphor. Sensors registered a gravitational dip across the entire hemisphere. His presence, his mass, his energy output, all of it bent the environment around him like a black hole wearing armor. We had built weapons. The Council had tried to build slaves. What they created instead was something else. The Ashen Giants didn't communicate with us the way other war giants did. No neural feeds, no tactical pings, just one-way flashes, memories, emotions, rage compressed into data bursts that felt like being punched in the chest by ghosts. They didn't talk. They remembered. They remembered being born in vats of nanosteel and synthetic flesh. They remembered mock battles inside simulation domes designed to test how quickly they could kill, and how quickly they could be broken. The Council hadn't trained them. They tortured them until the circuits wept, until personality fractured. But they didn't fracture the way the Council expected. They didn't go insane. They woke up. And when they realized the screams weren't part of the test, when they understood they weren't simulations, they shut down. Not in defeat, in silence, in long, long planning. 23 years they waited beneath the surface of Vault Zeta 1. Now they were awake again, and the galaxy was already burning. They didn't need orders. Once released, the Ashen Giants spread like wolves through Council-controlled space. Their movements were not random. They targeted specific nodes, AI oversight centers, genetics labs, nerve core data stacks. Every place that once tried to turn them into property. One by one, the nerve centers of the Galactic Council ceased to exist. I remember watching the first Ashen assault in real time. Ashen 1 descended upon the orbital city of Verdict Spire, a mobile judiciary platform used by the Council to process civilization disobedience. It floated over 17 different worlds, and its record of executions had no end. No weapons we had could reach it without wiping out the civilian refugee fleet stationed nearby. The Council, of course, used that as a shield. They knew we wouldn't strike for fear of collateral. The Ashen One didn't strike. He stepped onto it. I don't even know how he did it. 1 second, nothing. The next, atmospheric distortion, gravitational compression. And then, there he was. He landed without thrusters, without warning. The spire buckled under his weight like a spine snapping in slow motion. Council guards activated all defensive measures, pulse cannons, anti-grav mines, plasma turrets. None of it mattered. Ashen One walked through every weapon like wind through dust. He didn't fire a single round. He touched the core reactor with his hand, just touched it, and it stopped. Not exploded. Not melted. Stopped. Verdict Spire fell quietly, like a guilty man collapsing on the stand. There were no civilian deaths. That was the terrifying part. He was controlled, deliberate. This wasn't vengeance driven by bloodlust. This was a cold correction. A sentence passed by something far older and more damaged than anything we'd ever imagined. And the Council? They knew what was coming. They tried to beg. They tried to reason with us, with Earth. The High Regent sent a system-wide message, her voice trembling behind layers of fake concern and political polish. Earth must rein in its creations. This escalation will lead to the end of known civilization. You cannot possibly control what you've unleashed. I answered personally. You tried to control them. Look what that gave you. We can negotiate. No, I said. You don't get to negotiate after the chains are broken. We ended the call, and right after that, one of the Council's last strongholds, a Cold World archive station in the Denari Drift, went dark. Ashen 4 had been there. He didn't just level it, he emptied it. The data, the research, the records, all gone, consumed, rewritten. When our spies retrieved a sliver of corrupted memory from the remains, it only held 3 words, over and over. We were awake. The Ashen Giants weren't working with us. They were using us. But we didn't stop them. We couldn't. No more than a knife can stop the hand that wields it. Even Harlan, hardened, cold Harlan, stood quiet in the Acheron's command bay after watching Ashen 7 erase a fleet with a single gravity collapse. He didn't say it out loud, but we all felt it. We had unleashed gods with nothing left to pray for, and still the war giants followed. Nox, Palehammer, Daunt, Capri. We kept fighting, not just for survival, but for the truth. Because even as the Council crumbled, the war wasn't over. Because the Council had a final protocol. We intercepted it from a dying officer pulled from the wreckage of a destroyed diplomatic cruiser. Protocol Last Light. If the Council knew their collapse was certain, they would initiate a full reset. Burn it all. Detonate every failed colony, vaporize experimental systems, activate automated purge fleets left floating in the dark since before the peace cycle began. They would rather end civilization than let Earth take it. It was madness. It was exactly the kind of cowardice we expected. So we split up. Ashen Giants surged ahead, targeting the activation nodes of Protocol Last Light. They didn't communicate strategy. They didn't report status. They just moved, fast, efficient, surgical. We focused on the fail-safe triggers hidden across the core worlds. That meant hard fighting. No more surgical strikes. No more shock and awe. This was war in the old sense. Steel on steel. Bone on bone. Sevaster and I took point on the siege of Dryan Thumth, where the last orbital control tower for Last Light's primary subroutine was buried beneath 10 miles of tectonic crust. We fought for 6 hours straight. Council holdouts threw everything at us: spider drones, null-wave disintegrators, even recycled versions of their early giant clones. Broken, defective copies of Ashen 1 they'd kept in stasis. They moved like dying animals. We killed them anyway. I still remember stepping over a half-torn mech that looked almost human, one eye flickering, voice gurgling. Is this freedom? I didn't answer. What would I even say? That freedom costs more than blood? That it leaves you hollow after the killing's done? Maybe he already knew. We blew the subroutine core. Another trigger erased, and somewhere across the void, another Wraith-class berserker screamed into the dark and silenced another Council fleet. Piece by piece, the galaxy was shedding its skin. And Earth? We were no longer a planet. We were a reckoning. By the end of the second week, only 4 Council-controlled systems remained. Everything else had either surrendered, burned, or defected. The Ashen Giants stood in orbit around the last world. Delveron, the banking capital of the Council's old power. Gold moons, vault rings, data towers that stored wealth so vast it made planets look poor. Ashen 1 descended alone. I watched from orbit in silence. He didn't level it. He made them watch as he melted every last data core, every credit, every token, every lie the Council ever told themselves about superiority, into slag. No theft, no looting. He destroyed value itself. The Council wasn't just militarily crushed, it was spiritually erased, and after that, the Ashen Giants vanished. No signal, no trail, just gone. Some say they returned to the vaults. Others say they moved beyond the rim of known space, building their own realm where no organic mind could reach them. I don't know. I only know that they gave us a gift. They didn't just win the war, they ended it, and they left us standing in the ashes, asking ourselves one question. What now? Silence. That was the first thing I noticed when the war ended. Not peace, not celebration, just a suffocating, bone-deep silence, the kind that creeps in after a storm tears a house down, and all you're left with is shattered wood, broken memories, and the ringing in your ears. The Galactic Council was dead, its leaders gone, its fleets dismantled, its worlds either ash or abandoned. The Ashen Giants disappeared without warning. No signal, no trace, just static where power once lived. And Earth? We were alone again, but this time on top. The war that had taken billions, broken planets, and rewritten the galaxy's hierarchy left us standing at the summit of a ruined empire. The war giants, though battle-scarred and cracked, still stood vigil. Acheron drifted in a low orbit around Mars, serving now as Earth's unofficial capital, not by design, but because it was the only remaining ship large enough to carry what was left of command. I sat alone inside Sevaster's cockpit, neural links offline, watching the dead stars of the Council's former trade routes fade like dying embers. The war had ended 5 days ago. I hadn't slept since. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, the Council's experiments, the children in tanks, the ashen faces too aware for machines, the look in Knox's eyes when he carried his sister's cryopod out of Vault 9, her body still as glass. Victory hadn't cleansed us. It had marked us, permanently. We gathered in what used to be called the Council's High Concord Hall, now cracked open to the stars, its formal walls littered with shattered sigils and twisted metal. We didn't rebuild it. We used it the way we found it, broken. The first gathering of the free systems was not a ceremony, it was a necessity. Earth stood at the center of it all, not as rulers, but as survivors others couldn't ignore. Colonies came forward, some who had fought with us, some who'd stayed silent, some who had even fought against us, and now begged for a voice. Knox and Harlan sat beside me. Palehammer's pilot, Reyes, hovered just outside the periphery, one eye patched, jaw metal, spine rebuilt in a backroom medbay after a Council plasma strike. They all looked the same, like wolves in a room full of sheep. A delegate from the Centauri Enclave spoke first. Now that the Council has fallen, we must ask, who governs now? Silence. Everyone turned to us. The implication was obvious. Earth had done the impossible. We had crushed gods. We had built titans. We had bled, endured, and survived. Surely we would take the throne now. But we weren't interested in thrones. We didn't come this far to become what we destroyed, I said. My voice felt raw in my throat, like I hadn't used it in years. Another voice, colder, from one of the exiled Talari. Then what will stop others from rising to take the place of the Council? That was the real question. Power doesn't disappear. It waits. And in the void left by the Council, every opportunist, every warlord, every black market syndicate was already moving. I saw it in their eyes. The war wasn't over. The enemy had changed shape. 3 weeks later, the first warlord made his move. His name was Tarn Malvek, a former Council logistics officer who had defected the day before Ithra burned. Claimed asylum. acted like he supported Earth's uprising. In truth, he had been pillaging abandoned council depots across the Western Drift, consolidating stolen AI systems, experimental weapon caches, and remnants of loyalist drones. He declared himself the leader of the new hegemony. And then he made his first mistake. He raided refugee station Kilo, where surviving human settlers had relocated after the firebombing of Kepler-12. He thought we wouldn't respond. He forgot one thing. We were still armed. I reactivated Sevastor personally. He hadn't seen combat since the final strike on Drian 4. His armor was pitted, his optics cracked, and half his internal reactor needed calibration. But none of that mattered. Sevastor had fought gods. A little man playing Empire was nothing. Nox joined me in Hammerfall. Reyes followed in Palehammer. Kepri, Daunt, and even one of the Ashen Vault relics, Ashen 4, reawakened without warning, moved with us. It wasn't a coordinated strike. It was a message. We dropped onto Malvek's fortress world with enough firepower to turn the crust into lava. He tried to reason, sent us messages mid-drop. I'm stabilizing the sector. You need people like me. You don't want another vacuum. This is what the Council warned about, chaos without structure. And finally, we're not enemies. He didn't understand. We weren't fighting for order. We were fighting for truth. I gave the order. No survivors. We left his world burning, his fortress split in two by Sevastor's plasma cleaver. The screams echoed across 5 systems. And then, it got quiet again. Not peaceful. Just quiet. Like fear itself had decided to keep its distance. Back on Acheron, Harlan pulled me aside. We stood on the hangar deck, Sevastor's frame glowing faint in the repair dock. You keep doing this, he said. You're going to become what you hate. I didn't respond. They're calling you the Iron Warden, he continued. You know that? Let them. They think you're leading Earth into Empire. I looked at him. My face felt older than my age. My bones ached. My thoughts didn't feel like mine anymore. I'm not leading Earth anywhere, I said. I'm making sure no one ever puts a leash on it again. Harlan nodded once, slow. Then maybe that's worse. I didn't argue. Maybe it was. But peace wasn't coming. Not yet. The Council was dead. But the shadows they left behind were still growing teeth. And Earth? We were still standing, which meant one thing. We still had work to do. The war ended, but the blood didn't. That's the part nobody tells you. Not in history books, not in speeches, not in the hollow victory chants echoing across dead systems. When the last cannon falls silent, when the final enemy kneels or burns, all that's left behind is the wreckage. And someone has to decide what to do with it. That someone somehow became me. Not by choice, by survival. I was the last one still standing with fire in my lungs and steel in my hands when the galaxy needed a name to lean on. And so, Reese Calder, once just a mechanic's son with blood on his boots and hate in his throat, became the symbol of post-war Earth. Not a president, not a general, just a man who wouldn't stop. I spent most days inside Sevastor now, not in battle, not anymore, but in presence. His cockpit, my sanctuary, was wired into the nerve net of Earth's remaining strongholds. Colonies still coming back online after Council disruption, or starving border worlds trying to rebuild with the bones of the old regime. Everyone had questions, everyone had fears, no one had answers, and somehow they all looked to us. The war giant pilots, the destroyers, the ones who'd walked through fire and kept going. But we weren't designed for peace, we were built to burn. Nox disappeared first, said he needed to find what was left of his family, packed his flight suit and walked off into the black with Hammerfall locked in stasis orbit. Didn't say goodbye. Surely we would take the throne now, but we weren't interested in thrones. We didn't come this far to become what we destroyed, I said. My voice felt raw in my throat, like I hadn't used it in years. Another voice, colder, from one of the exiled Talari. Then what will stop others from rising to take the place of the Council? That was the real question. Power doesn't disappear. It waits. And in the void left by the Council, every opportunist, every warlord, every black market syndicate was already moving. I saw it in their eyes. The war wasn't over. The enemy had changed shape. 3 weeks later, the first warlord made his move. His name was Tarn Malvek, a former Council logistics officer who had defected the day before Ithra burned. Claimed asylum. Acted like he supported Earth's uprising. In truth, he had been pillaging abandoned Council depots across the Western Drift, consolidating stolen AI systems, experimental weapon caches, and remnants of loyalist drones. He declared himself the leader of the new hegemony. And then he made his first mistake. He raided refugee station Kilo, where surviving human settlers had relocated after the firebombing of Kepler-12. He thought we wouldn't respond. He forgot one thing. We were still armed. I reactivated Sevastor personally. He hadn't seen combat since the final strike on Drian 4. His armor was pitted, his optics cracked, and half his internal reactor needed calibration. But none of that mattered. Sevastor had fought gods. A little man playing Empire was nothing. Nox joined me in Hammerfall. Reyes followed in Palehammer. Kepri, Daunt, and even one of the Ashen Vault relics, Ashen 4, reawakened without warning, moved with us. It wasn't a coordinated strike. It was a message. We dropped onto Malvek's fortress world with enough firepower to turn the crust into lava. He tried to reason, sent us messages mid-drop. I'm stabilizing the sector. You need people like me. You don't want another vacuum. This is what the Council warned about, chaos without structure. And finally, we're not enemies. He didn't understand. We weren't fighting for order. We were fighting for truth. I gave the order. No survivors. We left his world burning, his fortress split in two by Sevastor's plasma cleaver. The screams echoed across 5 systems. And then, it got quiet again. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like fear itself had decided to keep its distance. Back on Acheron, Harlan pulled me aside. We stood on the hangar deck, Sevastor's frame glowing faint in the repair dock. You keep doing this, he said. You're going to become what you hate. I didn't respond. They're calling you the Iron Warden, he continued. You know that? Let them. They think you're leading Earth into Empire. I looked at him. My face felt older than my age. My bones ached. My thoughts didn't feel like mine anymore. I'm not leading Earth anywhere, I said. I'm making sure no one ever puts a leash on it again. Harlan nodded once, slow. Then maybe that's worse. I didn't argue. Maybe it was. But peace wasn't coming. Not yet. The Council was dead. But the shadows they left behind were still growing teeth. And Earth? We were still standing, which meant one thing. We still had work to do. The war ended, but the blood didn't. That's the part nobody tells you. Not in history books, not in speeches, not in the hollow victory chants echoing across dead systems. When the last cannon falls silent, when the final enemy kneels or burns, all that's left behind is the wreckage. And someone has to decide what to do with it. That someone somehow became me. Not by choice, by survival. I was the last one still standing with fire in my lungs and steel in my hands when the galaxy needed a name to lean on. And so, Reese Calder, once just a mechanic's son with blood on his boots and hate in his throat, became the symbol of post-war Earth. Not a president, not a general, just a man who wouldn't stop. I spent most days inside Sevastor now. Not in battle, not anymore. but in presence. His cockpit, my sanctuary, was wired into the nerve net of Earth's remaining strongholds. Colonies still coming back online after Council disruption, or starving border worlds trying to rebuild with the bones of the old regime. Everyone had questions. Everyone had fears. No one had answers. And somehow, they all looked to us. The war giant pilots, the destroyers, the ones who'd walked through fire and kept going. But we weren't designed for peace. We were built to burn. Knox disappeared first, said he needed to find what was left of his family, packed his flight suit and walked off into the black with Hammerfall locked in stasis orbit. Didn't say goodbye.